Welcome everyone to tonight's Dharma talk. Tonight, following in the wake of our Rohatsu session and making the turn toward the winter solstice, the shortest day and longest night of the year in the northern, we are in the west, but the northern hemisphere. Seems like a blessed moment, this pause between light and dark. On the last day of our Rohatsu sesshin, in the pre-dawn darkness, we celebrated Shakyamuni Buddha's enlightenment with a candle lighting ceremony. In the zendo, each one went up to the altar. We had it rearranged and lit a candle and bowed, more than 40 candles. And online, those online lit a candle and just had it there before them. So by the end, the zendo and the cloud were glowing. We sat illumined in this illumined darkness. And then one by one, we read the head chapter of this collection of koans known as the Hekiganroku, or transmission of light. The head chapter, also known as chapter 0, Shakyamuni Buddha's awakening. It begins with the Buddha's exclamation on seeing the morning star. I and the great earth and all beings simultaneously attain the way. Simultaneously. There is no other way. You are that. I often envision that and say, just one shining. Light, dark, through it all. So as a theme or a through line for this session, Henry and I took up Hakuin's Song of Zazen, this famous verse about his own awakening experience. It begins, "From the beginning, all beings are Buddha, like water and ice. Without water, no ice. Outside us, no Buddhas, no awakening." The song of Zazen, springs from Hakuin's own experience, and it resounds with Shakyamuni Buddha's awakening. This very place is the lotus land. This very body, the Buddha. Sometimes called the other shore. The other shore, right here. Our practice is an expression of this reality, this fact, the fact of who and what we are. Zen calls it our true nature, essential nature, fundamental nature, that nature that's pervading everything, right here. In the course of his life, Hakuin's teaching increasingly focused on helping his students see the absolute identity of what Zen calls form and emptiness. There is no other emptiness. Yes. It's a blessed relief to realize it for ourselves, even just a glimpse. I have a student I've been working with who sometimes will be talking about this world, this empty, infinite world, this dynamic world, and back and forth, and then suddenly she'll pause and say, fact check. Just looking in. Is that really what I'm seeing? Is that this world? Oh, okay. Yes. It's true. And yet. So how then does this address us? At what you might call the nub of our brokenness, maybe our sense of lack, within and without. This very beautiful, very deep session ended Friday afternoon. Time of such rich practice, with its challenges, of course, and its beauty. And then the next day, in the afternoon, came the news of the mass shooting at Brown University. I'm sure you know, 2 students killed, many injured. And then Sunday morning, we woke to the headlines of the mass shooting on Bondi Beach in Australia. A Hanukkah celebration turned to terror. And later that same day, the stabbing deaths of Rob and Michelle Reiner. Our hearts went from wide open to blown open. How does this practice address us at the nub of suffering, our own and the whole world, the broken, beautiful world? In the days since sesshin, kind of sitting with that question, an image has come to mind. It's one of Hakuin's most famous paintings. He titled it, "Blind Men Crossing the Bridge." And he painted this at least 8 times in different versions. He was a master calligrapher, painter. Ink on paper, delicate and evocative. The one that came up in my mind's eye depicts a log, like a branch of a tree, extending out over a chasm, an abyss. You just don't see the bottom. And not quite reaching the other shore. This long branch, and then a gap. 3 blind men feel their way across, really drawing the eye to the center of the painting. So here's just an excerpt from a description I came across by the American artist, calligrapher, scholar, historian, Stephen Addis. He wrote about this painting. The blind men start from the right and seem to be struggling harder and harder to cross the bridge. The first holds his sandals in his hands as he reaches out with his staff. The second puts his staff in his belt and reaches out with his fingers. And the third crawls forward with his sandals tethered at the end of his staff for balance. You see all of that, and it's just a few strokes of the pen, a brush. Crossing over to the other shore. It's a common metaphor for enlightenment. Metaphor. Our Roshi, the abbot of Sambo Zen, has said more than once, Zen doesn't do metaphors. It's the fact. And the Heart Sutra does offer this as more of a proclamation, this crossing over right at the end. Gate, gate, para samgate, bodhisvaha. Just gone to the other shore. In Hakuin's depiction, the only way to that other shore is with a leap or a fall. And in his painting, up in the left-hand corner, he includes a waka poem that he composed. Sort of like the scene in the painting and the circumstances of our lives. Here's his short poem. Both the health of our bodies and the fleeting world outside us are like the blind man's round log bridge. A mind/heart that can cross over is the best guide. This mind, heart, heart, mind. So then in his commentary in another place on the Heart Sutra, Hakuin wrote of that phrase, to reach the other shore. But where is that? Take one more step. Is there a soul on earth who belongs on this shore? How sad to stand mistaken on a wave-lashed quay. Wave-lashed quay. Something jutting out into the ocean. That leap. One more step. Hakuin made it more than once in his lifetime, or you could say it fell on him. And he came to see that this wave-lashed quay really is exactly the other shore. Right here, right in the midst of it. Soaking in the thing we seek. And broken. There's a book by a friend who wrote this little slim volume long ago of the beginning, like the first decade of his own Zen journey and his own experience, very surprising experience of this first sort of falling away, falling open. And he titled his book, "If You're Lucky, Your Heart Will Break." Break all the way open. Because that's what this really is. Sometimes this practice is likened to matching ourselves to our true selves, And then in some unguarded moment, suddenly, just that. So to look into this tonight, I'd like to take up a koan, a teaching that comes down to us from Unmon, Yunmen, a 9th century Tang Dynasty master, the master who once famously asked his assembly to say a word about the world, what he called, after the full moon. And then, in that same case, very short, Unmon himself answers on their behalf. And he says, every day is a good day. What is he seeing about this very world that allows him, compels him to say that? So here's the case I'd like to look at, and not too long. It's from the collection Hekiganroku, or Blue Cliff Record, case 62, called Unmon's One Treasure. The case. Unmon spoke to the assembly saying, within heaven and earth, in the midst of the universe, there is one treasure hidden in a body. It picks up a lantern and goes to the Buddha hall. It takes the temple gate and places it on the lantern. There's a slightly different translation, many different, but another one I know is, between heaven and earth and within the universe, there's a single jewel. It secretly dwells within a mountain of form. Yeah, just noticing the jewel of the flowers on the altar. That mountain of form. So this part of the case is a quote from what's thought to be a 5th century, very early, Chinese text called the Hosoron, or a treatise on the treasure chamber of the Dharma. It's thought to be Zeng Zhao, or in Japanese, Jo Hoshi. There's a story behind it, this verse, that this monk Jo was about to be executed for refusing to recant his vows. And he asked for a 1-week reprieve so that he could write this text, this verse. Actually, that is thought to be kind of a legend, because the emperor at the time, if it was the time, was actually quite supportive of Buddhism. But what does it say about the way this is recalled? 1 week before being executed. And this is what he writes. One treasure hidden in a body. Just one body? This body? Each of these bodies? And why is it hidden? And how? Just briefly, I'm reminded of a story that Ryon Roshi, our abbot, has told on a number of occasions over the years. I think it's a strong memory for him. He was a middle schooler, I believe, sitting at the table with his father, Yamada Kon Roshi, such an important teacher in this lineage. And Kon Roshi would sit there with his son and ask him, "Where are you? Where are you?" Masamichi, his familiar name. "Where are you?" And he'd say, "I'm here, Father." And Kon Roshi would say, "That's your legs. Where are you?" I'm here, Father. Well, that's your arms. Where are you? Here, I'm here. Of course, that's your head. Where are you? A single treasure hidden because it's so intimate, invisible, because actually it is your I. E-Y-E. There's a line from a sutra that resonates with Johoshi's verse. The true Dharma body of Buddha is like the empty sky. This true treasure, it's like the empty sky. It manifests its form corresponding to things, just like the moon on the water, like a reflection, a dream. Nothing of substance. Actually, nothing at all. But you can see it. We can see it in its beauty, in its heartbreak. Nothing to have or hold, but of inestimable value. This treasure. Unmon doesn't tell us how to find it or come home to it, but he does say how it functions. And maybe there's a pointer there. He says, it, the treasure, the jewel, or another translation says, you pick up. It picks up a lantern and goes to the Buddha hall. Fine. Then it takes the temple gate and puts it on the lantern. This treasure, you, can do anything. Light the way to the place of practice and upend any sense of fixity about what that place is. You know, if you've ever been to Japan or China, Korea, the temple gates are massive. Picks up the temple gate and puts it on the lantern. Unmon's world, topsy-turvy, in terms of our ordinary sense of up, down, inside, outside, big, small, self, other. Topsy-turvy and utterly alive with possibility. What is this absolute capacity that functions beyond the parameters of any constructs or assumptions? It takes up the temple gate and places it on the lantern. What if that's another way of saying, you stand up, take a step, sit long on the cushion or bench or chair. Bend down, put on your shoes. Temple gate, lantern. One functioning. And each bit, all of it. In one of the shared talks of our Rohatsu sesshin, we came to a line in the Song of Zazen where Hakuin says that even our delusions are nothing but the activity of this one treasure. That called to mind a passage from Dogen, for me, a reference to how he writes, can we possibly untangle the tangle of our human failings, of all these delusions. And Dogen then says, our entanglements are it. Just this fact arising in that way. Henry listened to this from me and from Dogen, and he said, well, how does that help? And we fell into a conversation about allowing, about what we might think of as radical acceptance, about humility, without adding or sticking to anything. Our abbot has said, you sit right in the middle of it all. It picks up the lantern. It takes the temple gate. So just because, here's a little passage from Dogen, how he has construed this world. He writes, how can we consider the universe of many worlds large? How can we consider an atom small? Both are not true. How can you get it right with a single phrase, smashing our old nest of views held of the whole universe until now, dropping off our sandals, worn to enter and leave? How will you speak of it? This is the line that brought this to mind. He says, a frog on the ocean bottom eats porridge. The jeweled rabbit in the heaven washes the bowl. Just if Henry were here, he might say, how does that help? Well, you get a sense of it, you know? How dynamic, how free, how beyond anything we think we know, and yet how intimate. There's another line in Johosi's verse, all things and I have one and the same root. Great Master Sekito or Shurto awakened on reading a passage from this verse, the Hosoron, that line he read. The one who realized that the myriad things are one's own self. All these things wherever you turn. That one is no different from the sages. So then in his own verse, the Song of the Grass Hut, Sekito writes, really to us, turn around the light to shine within, then just return. The vast, inconceivable source can't be faced or turned away from. That one treasure, that inconceivable source, can't face it, can't turn away from it. Where is the only place it can be? In his teaching, I mentioned that Hakuin keeps coming nearer and nearer to this and then focusing on it. And he writes, what is real Zen? It's to make everything, coughing, swallowing, waving your arms, motion, stillness, words, action, the evil and the good, prosperity and shame, gain and loss, right and wrong, to make it all into one single koan. He tells us to immerse ourselves totally in our practice at all times. Whatever's going on, there it is, this activity. take up the lantern, or like we did early the other morning, a flashlight, and go to the zendo. Take up the zendo, put it on the lantern. Does our seeing, even our looking, make a difference for the world? I and the great earth and all beings simultaneously. Yeah, I have a little more that I thought to say, but I just feel this winding down. Maybe I'll share just one more story. Came up from some years ago. I was walking across the campus of the college where I was about to begin a new semester, and my father had driven us north, a full day's drive. But he was walking alongside before heading back home. And we were having, this conversation, talking about life and about doing the next thing. I remember saying to him, "This may not make any difference, but it matters." Now I think that might have been a little glimpse of my feet starting to turn toward the Zen path. Actually now think that it does make a difference. And it matters. Hakuin said, "Forget yourself, and you become the whole universe." All of it. There's great potency there, and freedom and compassion. So just grateful to these masters for lighting the way, and to each one for walking it together. Thank you all.